cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, Jon Saenz.
Hello, and welcome to From the Dust podcast. I am your host, Jon Saenz. Whenever you are, whatever you're doing, hope you're highly favored and highly blessed. If you have a story or testimony you would like to share, go ahead and hit me up at fromthedustpodcast@outlook.com. That's fromthedustpodcast@outlook.com. Voices need to be heard. Stories need to be told. So today, we're going to do something a little bit different, but on the right topic, testimony, story. But I want to do something different with this podcast from time to time. I want to talk about different subjects, different topics. So today we're going to talk about growing up PK. And if you don't know what PK is in the church world, that's pastor's kid. That's preacher's kid. So with any guest I have, that's a special guest. But today I have a special guest. It's my carnalito, Felipe, and he's here to share a little bit of his story and his background, how it was growing up in ministry. So we're going to go ahead and bring him in and introduce him. What's up, Felipe? How are you, bro?
What's up, James? How you doing?
I'm doing blessed, man. I'm doing blessed. Can't complain,
Yeah, it's good.
So, let's for my different episodes I have had people talk about their testimonies, their stories, and what they've been through. We can do that, but I want to talk about how it was growing up in ministry for the people that don't know anything about it, they haven't experienced it, So, let's just get into it, man. Let's talk about how old you are and where'd you grow up?
Well, right now I'm actually 24 years old, and I grew up in Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley. That's where I was born, and maybe around the middle school age of 12, 13, and we moved to Central California. And then after that, ministry and life, just moving back and forth from Los Angeles to the Valley, to ending up somewhere now. Somehow I ended up in Northern California, and right now I'm actually in Antioch, California. I'm actually in what's called a discipleship home, living, working, and doing ministry. So that's kind of a little bit of my background.
So, like some of my guests that I have coming on, and that I have on past my last few, you didn't experience the world, am I right?
Not necessarily, no. So like, one of the biggest things about like my testimony in my life is that I've never, even to this day, to this point, I've never as much as had a cigarette. The hardest type of alcohol that I've taken was NyQuil when I had a cold. And it's like, that's kind of like the testimony. Like, me and you, we grew up in a ministry where we were trying to reach drug addicts, gang members, and people whose lives were destroyed by substance abuse and like reckless lifestyle and all that. And I totally lived a different life, seeing a different perspective of all that. So it kind of has like a different kind of story to it, but it ultimately points to God and to my need for a savior stuff.
Right. That's why I want to bring in different people, not just the people that lived it, but you saying that and you watching, because our dad's pastor, he also wasn't just a pastor, but he was a home director. He brought in people, men and women, homes that were on, drugs and stuff, and helped them through it.
Yep.
You watching that, seeing that, did that deter you from using?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100% true. It was seeing the kind of destruction it brought. I growing up, I started drifting away from God, but because growing up, seeing what I saw, I kind of remained away from drinking and substance abuse, even from the party scene a little bit, only because of the fact that I saw what it did to people. Like I even had opportunities to not, I wouldn't say I was dealing drugs, but I was handling drugs for my friends at school, but I would never touch them. I would never smoke them. I would just put them in my bag, backpack, stuff them, hide them, because the security wouldn't search me because I was a good church kid. So I was able to my friends were able to hook me up, and I kind of found a little posse, a little crew that I felt belonging with. But at the end of the day, it was just, I was a clean kid because I just saw what it did to, how it destroyed families, how it destroyed people's health, their lives, how it affected everyone around them. So kind of like I kind of was not scared, but I knew exactly where that road would take me eventually.
Right. One thing would like to mention is we've never had to experience our parents or our father using drugs, using alcohol. So that's one thing I'm always going to be thankful
Mm,
for, you know.
yeah.
But growing up in church, what were some of the things you learned to do and not to do as being a PK?
One of the things let me start with what not to do. One of the things that I learned right away, some people learn this lesson, some don't, is not really to judge people, because everyone has a different background, everyone has a different story, everyone has different convictions, and everyone has different vices and different virtues. So I learned really not to judge people, whether they're behind the pulpit or whether they just came into the rehab home for the first day and they're kicking drugs. Everyone is basically in the eyes of God on the same level. So who am I to judge? That's one thing I learned not to do. One of the things that I did learn in ministry is really, honestly, I think it would be the value of having a relationship with Jesus. That even though at one point in my life, I was even doubting God's existence, that kind of brought me back to, there's a personal God who loves me and knows me. So kind of like that was the one thing that really helps is knowing that, that relationship with Jesus is kind of, it's what's key.
Let's get into, I don't know that. Let's get into your dad guy. What caused that? What led you to think that?
So I think I was maybe like 12 or 13. I went to a youth convention and I had an experience with God, but it wasn't something solid. So at 14, I started going to high school. And at that time, I just moved from Central California to back to SoCal. And that was like a rough time. I didn't really have a relationship that was like super solid with my parents. I found more friendship with my friends at school, with those around, like in the community. And I had some influences in my life, even like on the internet. That's when the YouTube started becoming really popular. People were starting to post anything they wanted to. And I watched videos about atheism. I watched videos about evolution, all these things of the broad topic. People were trying to debate. And I kind of slowly started questioning everything I saw. That's one of the things like I learned not to judge people, because that was one of the things that made me doubt God's existence. Was that there's like certain people in church and ministry that are really in a process still. They're not perfect, but I had to kind of like, it kind of threw me away from church. And then when I was away from church, like I could tell like the enemy tried to pull me into like a really deep rooted, angry atheist kind of mentality and attitude. So I would say 14, 15, I really didn't want anything to do with church, anything to do with God, and then anything to do with religion. I was really strong, firm believer in science and evolution, and that we're just a speck of dust floating, and somehow all these things happened. Uh, and then at 16, I started going to church because my cousin had invited me, and there was a cute girl that I liked, so I went just to go and see what's up. But I kind of felt like that's where I started experiencing more of God in a real way, and I kind of discovered He was real. But it was in that time. So like a good example was one of the last kind of big battles I had with atheism is when our brother passed away. I remember a point where our mom would be praying for our brother John, and she received the promise that God was going to bring him home. And our mom interpreted that as she was going to bring him back to the family, back together. What I came to realize later on in life was that, God had a promise to bring him back into the fold, the sheepfold, back to His presence. But at that moment, as a 16-year-old, young man, full of emotion, full of energy, full of just any reason not to believe in God, I found myself just hating. Like I was in church, but I wasn't there for the right reasons. I was going because my cousin invited me, and he was like a brother to me, so I don't want to let him down. And I found myself like really like dealing with like, why would God allow this? And that was like one of the biggest final straws that kind of broke, of like my stronghold of atheism. It wasn't the last straw, it wasn't the end of it, but that was one of them. Was, why would God allow bad things to happen to good people? But then, when we don't live in a perfect world, and we live in a fallen world, and a lot of things happen that we can't control. but then, Romans 8:28, God knows, and he works it out for the good. So that was kind of like where I went. It was my teenage years. I just kind of just wanted a reason not to believe in God, and I looked for everything that I could, but eventually it did point me back to him.
It's funny how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Like with James, little James, we've had the same situation. He experienced John passing. He was young and he was hurt. But what did it with him was when his uncle Gabriel passed away, and he was angry and had asked, why does God allow such bad things to happen to people? And
Yeah.
I have to tell him, God gives us free will to do what we want, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we choose our own actions, and our actions have consequences. You know what I mean? Regardless of how the person is, regardless how the person lives.
Yeah.
That's what happens, our free will. And now he's slowly, coming back and acknowledging God and stuff, And he was joking the other day. I go, hey, who do you love? Who do you love more? He says, I love mom more than I love God. And I tell me, hey, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? You have to love God more than you love everybody. So he's getting there. But
Yeah.
and what some people don't realize is growing up PK, growing up PK is we have to be in the light, an example, and a reflection of our parents. So there's a lot of things we can't say, and there's a lot of things we can't do.
There's that whole pressure of some people think you're perfect or you're supposed to be a certain kind of level character, but you're really just as just as human as anybody else.
Right?
I think that's a big argument.
It's hard because when I remember being in school and messing around, people are like, isn't your dad a pastor? That's my dad, and I didn't get it as a kid. I didn't get it as a teen because I was just being rebellious. But growing up in time, it hits me like, you're a light, you're a reflection. How'd you do with that? What did that do for you?
That was one of the big turnoffs, because I didn't want to be a reflection. I wanted to be my own person. I didn't want to be an extension of church, of ministry, of God. And so dealing with that was kind of like, it was like one of those moments where you find yourself with an identity crisis, because I didn't want to be related at all to church or ministry. And all my actions outside of that would affect ministry, but also affect our family life. Like I would get in trouble at school, and one time I got in trouble with some kid, and we got in a fight, and his parents happened to be on, I think, the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, and they knew our father through city meetings and planning, and they kind of had like a disdain, but I was kind of disciplined for that, not because I got in a fight, but because I made the ministry look bad. Which, in retrospect, that kind of it makes sense now as an adult and as I'm older, and I see things that the way that we carry ourselves, and I was learning a lesson how to be respectful. But then at that moment, being a child, that kind of experience gave me a really negative, sour taste in my mouth, and that was like the big wrestle. Was like, okay, I want to be me. I don't want to be tied to this. I don't want to be my father's kid. I don't want to be known as so-and-so's son. I want to be Felipe. And that was like the big, kind of struggle. And I think a lot of people deal with that grow up in ministry, whether it's not pastor's kids or it's, your parents are involved in church, whether it doesn't matter what denomination, if you're heavily involved, you kind of still have that jacket that you carry no matter what.
Yeah. So growing up in the ministry, what were some of the things you were able to learn? Like I'm gonna tell a story that not many have heard. I'll let you know. You probably don't remember, but you will when I say them. What were some of the things that our father, being a minister, his love, compassion has he passed on to you?
Really, one of them was is having the skin of an alligator, but the heart of a dove. Thick skin, and because being in a position of leadership in any church or even in any organization, you're gonna have people. You're gonna have haters no matter what. One like a good story was when I was young, and we just went out to eat as a family after Sunday morning service, and we were in that big green van. It was a mental van. That was our family car, and we had an incident where we drove in the back alley, and I forgot who Dad was. I think he was teaching you or someone how
Yeah,
to
yeah.
drive the
This is
van.
where I was getting good, but I want you to tell a story. Good.
And I remember this because I was sitting in the back seat, like at the very back, and I guess the horn went off, and then there was a man, homeless man who was there, and apparently he was using drugs, but he got a glass bottle and he threw it at the van, and it literally cracked right where I was sitting, and it didn't break anything, but it still freaked me out. And my dad went out to go look, and he actually, he rushed our father with a knife, and I remember like vaguely now, but it was clear enough. Like I had the image still in my head of my dad right there, not knowing what to do, to where like the guy standing right there with the knife, and I'm like, dude, like what's going on? We left without confrontation, and then my dad called the police and whatnot. I think my mom did, and the cops went to go find out about him, and ended up having an altercation, and I guess he ended up passing away. But one of the things that I learned was that my mom and then my dad, they were praying for him, and I think they reached out, try to find out who he was and where his family was, and really try to be loving and be caring to someone that they didn't even know. Someone who just threatened to attack them and hurt their family, they're still willing to stretch out and kind of give their condolences, but also to show love,
That's what I was going to bring up. What that incident, I don't know if you remember what happened afterwards, but when the cops, they showed up to the house and they came in and they were speaking to Dad and they were telling him the story. And when the cop told him, well, don't worry about it. We took care of it. There was an incident and he's dead. I don't know if you remember the look on his dad's face, but that was the first time that I see my dad cry.
No way.
He literally cried tears. And the cop told him, why are you crying? This guy tried to hurt you. This guy tried to hurt you in front of your family. And Dad said, because those are the people I'm called to reach. Those are the people I love.
Yeah.
And then
That
at that moment, I seen the real compassion, and I seen a love, the love that he had for his city and for the people, even though they tried to hurt him, even though they tried to hurt him. And that was a big for me.
about that incident. I just knew that, you know, watching everything happen from like a child's perspective, it was like uh, just seeing a crazy incident and to seeing how mom and dad handled it after. It kind of brought me to like a kind of a good example to see what it is to love God and love people.
Yeah, I'm almost. I don't that way he would hear this, I'm sure. But yeah, that taught me how to be compassionate, even towards the people right now. Because I have a few haters right now. And I don't do nothing to nobody, bro. I don't go nowhere. I don't talk bad to nobody. I just do me. It just happens, man.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. It's
Yeah, yeah.
hey, you have people that love you, people that hate you, but you got to pray for them both, right?
Right. Oh yeah. What else? What else have you learned? What else has he passed down to you?
One thing, and this is what like our ministry is known for, but it's loyalty to the vision and to the ministry. That's one thing that to me, just kind of he's passed down. I know that as long as I'm involved with serving God, unless explicitly I hear a voice from God telling me to move on elsewhere, I know that I'm called to the ministry of Victory Outreach, because it's something that was our father's legacy, and it's because of the vision, the Victory Outreach, to reach drug addicts, gang members, the outcasts of society, at that time the one that nobody wanted, that our family was able to even exist. I wouldn't be born if it wasn't for the vision. I wouldn't be born if it wasn't for the rehab homes. I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Pastor Sonny, a heroin addict from New York, opening up church in East LA, and then eventually it spread many years later to somehow reach our family. So that's one thing I learned is how to be loyal to the God-given vision that God has given us as a family, given me as a personal calling, and also to love really the people that are involved with the vision. I do have a high respect for our founders, and I do have a high respect for our elders, our our pastors and our leaders that have, they literally labored their years away for what they in the outreach now they're calling it the third wave revival. And for the third wave, it's allowed us to really pioneer and go places that they've never gone before. So that means like they started churches in some of the most torn down neighborhoods. They've loved some of the most unlovable people. We've seen the sacrifice that our father did. But these are people who've done it for many, many years. I'm talking 30, 40, 50 years now. And they're still doing it. So to me, that's what he taught me, was how to love the vision and love the calling that God's placed upon your life, and to be sold out to it. That's one thing is as much as it's kind of like a bad thing to have a hard head or have like, but when it comes to the vision, when it comes to the ministry, I have a hard head. I'm sold out. You can't convince me otherwise that this is not what God has called me to do.
Right. He's and he's still loyal to the world, to the word of God, and he still has a love for the ministry. Like for me, I believed in Groove View for many years, but when you know God's voice and God says, God said send me to another ministry, which I'm thankful for. But I still tell people, I still have a lot of love. I still talk to a lot of people that are part of the ministry. But in this ministry where God's brought me to, I'm at a happy place in my relationship with God.
Yeah.
I'm at a place with my ministry, bro. I'm doing things, behind the scenes where normally I wouldn't get to do in another church, So I'm thankful for that. And let's see where we're getting at. The music. Did Dad not pass on the legacy music to us?
Yes. So that one, it's crazy. I didn't even think about that because it's so ingrained into me. Like it kind of like just not, it kind of even come to my mind. But yeah, music is really big, especially like for me, I was a late bloomer, or at least maybe because I was younger. So I grew up watching you, Peter, everyone else play instruments, sing and music, and Dad singing his oldies. I kind of just let all that pass until I was like 16, 17, and I picked up a bass and I started playing, like a little bit of cover music, and I started playing some worship. And I haven't stopped putting instruments down since then, because what's crazy too is I found a picture of Dad leading worship with the bass. That last, I think it was last Thanksgiving I was visiting, and I was going through old pictures, and I saw that, and then I saw a picture of like a little certificate he got from the School of Ministry. He was a certified worship leader, and it's crazy how to see that like we all have now that gift. We all have that kind of like respect and kind of like passion for music and just being creative in general. Like since then, like I've literally, every instrument that I try to learn, I pick it up. Like I picked up bass, then I picked up acoustic guitar, a little bit of keyboard, then I picked up some drums. And through the past few years since I got saved, actually, was when it all happened. Like I feel like that's when the anointing came, when I got into the vein and God really poured out. Like that's when I learned how to play all these instruments. But I think it was because the fact that we came from such a heavy, music oriented family, that I was able to just walk in that anointing. And then now here I am today. I do a lot of other stuff, but in the church, one of my main functions now is actually coordinating music with the band, and getting them kind of like situated, set up with everything we need: resources, chords, progressions, timing, music directing, all that. So it's kind of weird, but it's just so ingrained in my life. I almost forgot about it because it's just me.
Right. Well, because you're used to you grew up. Excuse me. You grew up seeing it,
Yeah.
Now, what are you going to school in ministry or anything like that?
Yeah. So at this moment, because of everything that happened with the virus, I had to focus more on actually doing like ministry media work. So I'm not taking this semester, but for the most part, yeah, I'm still in what's like called VETI. It's like the Victory Education Training Institute. It's basically a Bible college. I'm currently living in a discipleship home, which after a certain time being here, I get credits toward getting an AA degree in ministry. So I'm doing that currently. It's more like an ongoing thing. I don't have an exacted, finish date, just because of the way things are like progressing and unprecedented times that we're living in. But for the most part, I'm going towards that goal, and I should, if I'm not mistaken, by the time I'm 26, 27, I should have at least a bachelor's degree if I, really focus on it in the next 2 years.
So your plan is totally become a preacher, right?
Yeah. So I know that, as much as I'm gifted in music and media, um, I know my calling is to be a pastor, not really a preacher. That's part of it, but I know for myself, God's called me to be a shepherd and to help lead people, how to love people, and how to and just to care for people. And so I may not be like the super best preacher behind a pulpit, but I want to be like our father was when the cops came, and he had a genuine care for souls. I want to be that kind of pastor, that kind of leader. So that's where my calling is going to end up.
That's where I kind of see myself now. I know my ministry, they kind of have a similar ministry. So I'm gonna look into that, see what it's all about. But that's why I started this thing. A while back I was just thinking, man, like what more can I do? What more can I do for God? I got to do something more in my life. I want to be able, like our dad did. Whether he knows it or not, he did leave us a legacy. He left us a life of God, a life of love, a life of worship. Know how to pray, all that stuff. But I want to do the same thing, and I had to like, what do I do? And I listen to a lot of podcasts. Work, listen to worship. One day, God just, bro, start a podcast, James, and this is what I'm doing now, so they can look back and see that I was doing something, with the Word of God. Have my own little ministry going on, and here I am today. It's gonna be my fourth or fifth episode, and we'll see where God takes me. With the hopefully He takes me to where I see it's going. Like I always say, people ask me, why do you want to do this? Are you in it for money? I'm not in it for money, because you're not gonna make money off of this. You're not gonna make no fame.
Yeah.
I just want that one person to hear. I just want that one person to, or I heard this guy's story on this podcast, and it changed my life. That's what I'm doing. Just that one person.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because like it's like you said, it's just for that one person, and no matter who it is, or whether they hear it now or they find one of your episodes 4 or 5 years from now, like they're gonna have that opportunity to be ministered to. So that kind of makes it worth it, and that kind of gives you a legacy that, especially with the internet and how like communications change now, you have a special platform, that can reach literally anybody in the world. So who knows? You might save someone across the world in Europe or in Asia, just because they heard the message of hope.
Right. Before we end this, because eventually I want Dad to hear this, and I'm sure he will. If there's anything that you would want to relate to him and tell him, what would that be?
The biggest thing that I would want to say is that through it all, there's a song that's by and I only know this because of that. It's by Andre Crouch, and it says, through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I learned to trust in God, and it's something that I've learned, and it's something that because of him, I can say that through it all, whether from since I was born to the day that I leave this earth, that I know that my family was serving God, and I know that he tried his best, and he gave all that he could, and he's still giving what he can. And because of that, I have a future, and because of that, I have hope, and because of that, I'll have a family one day. You have a family now, and it's been worth it. Every bit of it's been faith. God's been faithful through it all. Every tear, every heartache, every headache, every bit of patience that he had with each and every one of us. We all had our own struggles at some point. Was worth it.
Right.
Even through the very end, God's been faithful, and so that's, if anything, that's what I want to say.
Well, I tell his dad, when you hear this episode, especially dedicated to you, I should have said in the beginning, but I'm sure, just like me, Felipe, we want to thank you for your hard work, for your diligence, and for your faithfulness and your heart of God that you pass on to us. Because without that, we wouldn't be the men we are today. We wouldn't have the heart to worship. We wouldn't have the heart for man. We wouldn't have the compassion or even the willingness to care. Because, when I do, sometimes I don't do it right, all the time. But when I feel, it's right, I see somebody, what he taught me, I just remember is when somebody who asks for food,
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't give them the money, because,
Yeah, yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
But
I still do that.
yeah, but what I do is, well, if you're hungry, let me buy you food. And I still do that, you know what I mean? And
Yeah, yeah,
I taught that to my kids, when they're younger, ask for money, but I wouldn't give them money. Why don't you give money? Because, you don't know what they're going to do, but if they're hungry and they want the food, give them the food. And they were taught, like, you know what? They were younger. Oh, mom, dad, can I give this person my food? And, he just taught us how to share and how to be compassionate. And I want to thank him for that.
yeah. That's true. I do that too. It's crazy. I thought I was the only one.
No, it's something, something that you learn that, that, and then I one time you remember, oh, where do I get it from? Well, I got it from my dad, and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I cherish that. But yeah,
yeah. It's like almost like instinct now.
yeah, it is, right? But I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, that's a good episode. And I want to thank you for your time and for what you're
Yeah,
doing. Hey, I know you're doing a good work out there. Keep doing it. And man, one day I'm going to see you walk around across that stage. You graduated, man.
yeah, for sure. And then like, I want to thank you for allowing me to come on it and share a little bit of my testimony. I didn't really share a lot of it, but I feel the opportunity. And just before we end, for those of that made it through the podcast and are listening now, my testimony for you in a nutshell is that you never know what God can do in your life. So if you're at a point where you're trying to figure out if you want to serve God or not, I'm a testimony of that. I'm a fruit of that. Our Father, who we talked about in this episode, he actually gave his life to God, and because of that, I'm alive. Well, your decisions now, whoever's listening, it'll change and it'll affect those around you more than you realize. And you can have a legacy, you can have a family, you can have a hope and a sense of belonging that only God can give. So that's my bit of my testimony is I'm alive today because someone else decided to serve God and love God. And you can make the same decision and have the best for your family and for your future. So I wanted to say that before we left because I know there's going to be someone that's going to need to hear that.
Hey, the floor is open. I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you that. And, I hope the right person hears this episode and they take it in. But yeah, I love you, bro. And we'll call that episode. And I'll see you soon.
All right, James.
Have a good one.
You too.